Hello and welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us, whether you are joining us live today on Zoom or whether you are listening to us on podcast or watching us on YouTube. My name is Justin McCarron from Everyday Resilience. I will be hosting this book launch from my very dear friends, Belinda Gannaway and Emma Bridger, who we will be speaking to in a moment. So, fantastic that so many of you could be here, and I'm sure you're all looking forward to getting your hands on the book so you can dive in and start picking it apart and looking at the top tips and reading the stories and the research and all of the goodies that are contained within its pages. To give you a brief overview of what the book is, it is a practical guide for HR professionals, business leaders, and anyone needing to create an employee experience that, here's the important bit, empowers people to perform at the best. So this is about people power. You'll also find in the book, it sets out simple steps for any team or organization that you can follow, and particular appeal to me as a relative novice in this field, it demystifies employee experience. It's packed with clear, practical tips, as I said, tools, lots of stories and examples, full of contributions from a number of wonderful experts in their field, many of whom are here with us today on the call. So a big thank you to all the contributors. A few of you will be speaking with us on this call later, so thank you to you too. This is going to be about showing you how to build a robust business case for employee experience, if that's partly what is driving you. It's going to help you align employee experience activity with organizational strategy to demonstrate impact, and it'll measure EX and demonstrate return on investment. So I'm hoping, whatever your interest in being here today and in learning a bit more about the book, something will stick out for you, that you will leave the hour feeling enriched and informed and enlightened and inspired, we hope. And certainly you'll feel like you've made a few new friends along the way. A brief plug, because we like a quote. The book has been described by Mark Levi from Airbnb as a must-read book for anyone working in the field of employee experience. So there's the plug. We are very interested, of course, in you, our audience. It's a conversation, so we will be interested to hear your thoughts and comments and questions as we go along. We will do a little bit of more formal style presenting at the beginning of this session, and then at the back end of the session, we'll open up the floor to questions. But please, as we go through, if anything occurs to you, do pop it in the chat. So you don't have to keep a hold of it for the whole time, and you can actually listen to what everyone else is saying. And Katie's keeping an eye on the chat, and she will circle back around and pick up on any of the comments or questions that we've missed. But before, as I said, we get started proper, we want to know a little bit about you and what has brought you here today. We have some idea why some of you are here, and we are not sure why some of the rest of you are here, which is lovely. So what we are going to do is just give you a little bit of a health warning. I am about to share a slide. Just saying, I know that's going to make me unpopular, but hopefully when you see the slide, you will forgive me. You'll understand that this is a concept that is best demonstrated visually. So in a moment, I'm going to ask Katie to share the slide. And all it is I'd like you to consider yourselves in terms of employee experience, what brings you here and what level of familiarity and experience and confidence do you have with the topic? So you can see the screen there. In a moment, you'll get a chance to vote. So are you more of a number one? Absolute Beginners by David Bowie. That's to say you don't know a huge amount about the topic, but you've turned up eager to find out more. Are you number two, getting better all the time? So probably intermediate, you're fairly familiar with the subject and you use some of the principles, or you have interest in fields that relate to the area. Or would you say you are uptown top ranking? That's number three. That's top of the heap. That's this is your bread and butter. And I know we've definitely got a few Uptown top rankers on the call today. So in a moment, Katie's going to share the poll, and we would love to hear from you all. Are you 1, absolute beginners, 2, getting better all the time, or 3, Uptown top ranking? Give us your thoughts, and we will see how the overall audience demographic plays out. Brief pause while I fill in my own. I will declare my interest now. I'm an absolute beginner. So I'm hoping I'm not the only one, but also it's fine.
That's going to be a song as well, hasn't it, Justin?
we've got Perry there wanting to join in. We know Perry's fond of singing a song. He's not the only one, of course. Our Katie has a fabulous songstress. So Katie, I'm not sure, how are we looking with votes? Are they coming in thick and fast?
Yeah, I'm ready to share.
Beautiful. Okie dokie, look at that. Isn't that interesting? So that's really, really helpful for us. So particularly for Emma and B and our guests, to bear that in mind when we're talking, that for some of our audience, this stuff will be pretty new. So for a good chunk of our audience, this stuff will be new. But for most of the audience, there's definitely a level of familiarity with the topic. And indeed, the 11%, well, there are a couple of you on this call who quite literally wrote the book. So we would hope that you would be counting yourselves as Uptown top ranking in this instance. So you've heard enough from me. I am going to hand over in turn first to Emma and then to Belinda to give us some insight into really what else would you like to say about the book that hasn't already been said by either myself or Mark Levi. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Justin. And I just want to say, like B said before, it's not the Oscars, but I do need to say a massive thank you, first of all, to everyone that's joined this call. Been just blown away by people's generosity, giving up their time and helping us with the book. So all the contributors that are on the call today, and you know, friends and family of mine and People Lab that have made the time to come off this call. So it's really lovely to see so many familiar faces, and it does really mean a lot, because there's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that goes into writing a book, and it doesn't come naturally to me, not something that I found easy at all. So it's lovely just to take a step back and sort of celebrate this. I think there's an area that I wanted to share that is something that's hopefully new. Justin, do you want me to share the Magica stuff now, or do you want to go to B first and then I'll share it? How would you like to play this?
I would say let's jump over to B and then let's come back to Magica. How's that?
That sounds good to me. Over to you, B.
Thank you. That's great, because it means then I can relax for the rest of the time and start my wine. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody coming. We're absolutely blown away to have 100 people actually with us tonight, which is just fantastic. Although I suppose it shouldn't really surprise me when I sort of drew a blank on, and I had a bit of a panic and imposter syndrome moment earlier in the year when we were working on this. I decided to take a very journalistic approach to writing my bit of the book, which my background was in journalism, which basically meant I got to ask a lot of people a lot of questions. And what totally blew me away in that process was absolutely everybody I reached out to said, yeah, great, when do you want to talk? So that, as Emma said, the generosity of people to give up their time and their expertise and their contribution, their thinking, has just been just outstanding. So it isn't the Oscars, but honestly, we have got about 10 or 15 individual contributors to the book. So thank you dearly to all of you. We've got about 20 people who've given us the most rave endorsements and reviews for the book. So thank you also to you. And to everybody else whose brains I have picked, who've read chapters, who've fed back on them, who we've quoted. Just this book really is full of your brilliant ideas. And for my bit of the book, I've just knitted them together. So thank you. Yeah, Emma, why don't you tell us about Magica?
Cool, thanks, B. You might notice as well, some of you, I'm having a cheeky drink, which I never normally drink in the week, but I thought, you know, it feels really weird to be on a kind of worky thing with a glass of wine, but, you know, hopefully you'll forgive me. Okay, so we were thinking about, you know, how can we make this, you know, worthwhile if you could come along to this session. And we wanted to share some new research with you. So this is hot off the press. You will find it all in the book. I've got my copy here. But I'm just going to share with you a little bit of research that we've kind of pulled together, and I say, you know, publishing the book for the first time. Now, many of you on the call I've worked with before, so thank you for coming on today. And you'll know that something that I nearly always do with people that I work with is a best experience activity. And what we mean by that is asking people to simply share stories about times when they were at their best at work. So when they had a great experience, when they were firing at all cylinders, when they were engaged, when they just look back at that time and say, that was brilliant. I loved my time when I was working then or in that place with those people. And we do this activity for a whole host of reasons that I won't go into now, but I've used this for many, many years. Even before People Lab days, I used it in-house. So since People Lab first started like 11 years ago, we've collected literally thousands of these stories, and we've always kept the data, the qualitative data. So people share their stories and we, write down what we heard and we collect it all. And for years, I thought, I must get around to looking at that data at some point because it's such rich data. I must get around to analysing it. And then, of course, COVID comes along and it's been awful for many people and a roller coaster, but I guess there are some silver linings. And one of my silver linings was having a little bit of headspace to actually go back to that research and analyse it for the book. And I have to say thank you here to Sarah Osborne, who may or may not be on the call, who was an intern we had in, who helped me do that. So she's an undergrad at Sussex Uni. And we worked through all of the data that we gathered over the years. And we said, what is it telling us? And actually, there was a really clear story, which is dead exciting. Because it's real qualitative data from thousands of people from across the world. So we've run these activities and collected stories from China, from Oman, from Europe, from the US, from everywhere, from small organizations, large organizations, from really diverse people. So I am going to share the last slide of the session. I want to share the model with you that we came up with. So if I could ask Katie to share this, and I'll just explain it a little bit. And we go into this in a lot of detail in the book, but this is hot off the press. And what we found was that there are very much two sides to the coin. There are what we call, first of all, the universal themes. So what you see around the outside of this model, which we call Magica, the Magica model is an acronym for the words around the outside. There are these universal themes that came up in pretty much every best experience story that we analyze. I'm sure these will not be a surprise to you. Just nice to have it all in one place, right? So these are the things that tend to be present when people are having a great experience at work, when they're thriving, when they're at their best. Now, in the book, we go into, the background of these different words, and we explain some of the psychology and neuroscience. There's a whole heap of science that actually backs up why you would expect to see these words. So I'm not going to go into them now. Have a look at them. They kind of make sense, I think. No surprises there. But this is only half the story. So yes, we have the universal theme. So this gets us like quite a good way forward in terms of how we design brilliant experiences. But we absolutely have to remember that the experience that we have at work is also very unique and personal to us. So if we were to all share our best experience stories now on this call, inevitably this stuff would come up, but there would be individual differences. So somebody might say, well, it was really good fun because, a really good experience because I had loads of fun and it was really sociable and it's work hard, play hard, and I remember, when I did some at the British Council, that was a really key theme that came out for them and that sort of, real sort of connectivity and social side to their work. But when we ran this for example, for Rolls-Royce, that side of things didn't come up at all. For them, it was much more about a really clear brief. I knew exactly what was expected of me. So the point I'm making is that, yes, we've got the universal themes, but we mustn't forget the individual differences. And we have to take time to speak to people and ask them to share their stories and their experiences to overcome our implicit biases about what we think good looks like, to allow them to share with us what good looks like for them. So that's kind of the model. We go into it in a lot of detail in the book. It's hot off the press. It's a brilliant blueprint to get you quite a way there to understand what you need to do to design great experiences. And at the same point, it also gives you a brilliant framework for going out and finding out what good looks like for your people as well. So it's all in the book. You all getting a copy of the book, so you'll be able to read up on it. Would love to hear what you think. We've also got a white paper. We're going to be launching this research out into the world in the next week or so. So we'll send you a copy of the white paper as well. If you can't be bothered to read all the stuff in the book, you'll have the sort of synopsis on the white paper. So wanted to share that with you because it's hot off the press and hopefully that is interesting insight for you. So that's the Magica model.
Marvelous. Thank you very much, Emma. And you're getting some visual signs. I can see some of your supporters giving you thumbs up and various signs of approval on the cameras that I can see. And you're also getting lots of love in the chat as well. Yeah, Magica, you must have been quite pleased about that when you went, hang on a second.
It took a while. I had a bit of a, there's some like light bulb moments. Magica.
Fantastic, fantastic. So folks, that's it. Thanks a million for that, Emma and B. That gives everyone, we've started to dip our toe into some of the themes, and particularly straight away already we can see how practical the book is, those of you who have a particular interest in the subject will probably want to dig into the white paper, but for everyone else, you can pick up the book and those things come off the page for you. So really, really practical and easy to apply, and written in a way for people like me can even understand, which is quite a feat. So listen, we mentioned earlier that we had a number of your lovely contributors, almost all of whom are on the call, but there's a few people that are going to join in and share a little bit of their experience. We've got so we've got 4 people to listen to. We're going to be talking to Damon Diener, to Nabel Crowhurst, to Lindy Busman, and to Sarah Corney as well. So we're going to pick on Damon first, if I may. First of all, Damon, thank you. You aren't the only one joining us from across the pond, but where are you calling us from today?
I'm in San Diego, California this morning.
Okay, well, good morning to you. And thank you again, Damon. We've had you on the Reset show before, so I really appreciate you taking some time out to join in this little celebration. Tell us a little bit about what the area that you contributed to the book in terms of the research that you spoke about with Belinda and Emma.
Yeah, so I have a role where I lead employee experience for IBM. So I contributed talking about, how we apply EX at corporate scale, the global corporate scale, which is massive in IBM's case, and especially how we weave in some of our technologies around AI and how we do that ethically.
Lovely. And Emma and B, would you like to jump in and pick up on some of the things that you found particularly helpful from Damon's contribution?
Yeah, so Damon taught me so much. Damon and I have had so many conversations over the last few months, and every time I've got stuck, I feel like I've turned to Damon, and he's been there to help and support and provide some new inspiration. So across the book, there's a little bit of Damon woven in. I suppose what one of the things that we began when we first began our conversation was to talk about personas and how personas play a role in designing EX at IBM. So maybe you can give us a little bit of more insight around that.
Sure. And yeah, feel free to pepper me with questions. Otherwise, I'll share some anecdotes about one project that we did around personas. Personas are one of those things that you can do it 100 different ways. Everybody does them slightly differently. So, everything I say, there's probably a counter argument for, so I'll keep that in mind. But yeah, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes and talk about how when we were starting the IBM transformation of HR to go from this organization that was very kind of org facing out to the employees, and we really wanted to transform the org to think about the employee first and how the employee sort of perceives the organization from the outside in. And that comes down to every way and every program in which, the kind of we engage with employees, and personas had a key role to play in that enterprise transformation that we were doing across our HR organization. So in this particular instance, we wanted to start broad and not get very specific. And so here we started with an approach that purist might call something more like archetypes as opposed to personas. But we set up this grid of 12 because we were trying to align the organization to have some consistency in how they were thinking about, the segments of our employee population and come together and work on them together. So the grid, and I'll just pop up a quick visual because I think it'll help. But then I'll turn it off really quickly because I know we're not going to use slides today.
It's not a slide,
Okay.
it's a visual, that's fine.
And also, Damon, we have to have a grid. Come on, at least one grid. Otherwise, everyone's going to get withdrawal symptoms, right? So go for it.
Okay, excellent. All right, here we go. Okay, so here's the grid of 12 that I'll talk to you about, some of the pros and cons of what we did. But if you look, down the left, the one axis is employees and managers and leaders. And then across the top, it's, are they new to that role or that dimension? Are they experienced? And then there are some special needs and challenges around those that are recently hired into those roles. And then something we added in one of our iterations shortly after, I think it was iteration 2 or 3, was we started uncovering the needs and the goals and the pain points around employees and leaders and managers that we were acquiring from other companies, through acquisitions, was a very kind of discrete set of needs and goals. And so this became our core set of 12. So I'll stop that sharing, but I think what's important here, just a couple things. One is that you probably noticed that we used illustrations as opposed to photographs. And this was something that, there's pros and cons for going either direction, but in our case, we felt like illustrations, gave us an opportunity to introduce a lot of diversity, so we could control that diversity very carefully. And we have, in even the illustration library goes farther than what you just saw. But also, photos have a way of introducing bias sometimes. And because we wanted to use these across our entire global population, we wanted them to be as flexible as possible. So we went the illustration route. Another couple best practices that we chose for this particular exercise was really staying away from those personal kind of data points around age, for example. We talk about tenure, which we think is important, but the templates we created around these personas for the teams to use focused on, what are their needs and their goals, their pain points or challenges, or their influences or the environment that they're in. And those were the most meaningful dimensions that we came up with to be able to use personas effectively. And so, I think those are some of the best tips and tricks, just from that exercise. And I could keep talking forever, but Belinda, do you have any other targeted questions you wanted to throw in?
Thank you. I've got a quick question for you, and then I think we'll go through all of our speakers tonight, and then we'll come to probably joint questions at the end. But do add your questions into the chat. But I'm going to be cheeky, Damien. I'm going to ask you a question because this is a question that we're often asked. So for me, personas are such a fundamental part of the design process, the design bit of EX design, when you're thinking about and creating human-centered design for new solutions and new approaches to make the experience better. So for me, they're fundamental. But what we do see in a lot of organizations is what we talk about as persona graveyards, multiple sets of personas in multiple places, but they're all just lots of nodding heads on the call. But they're all just left to die or wither. So how do you, what's your sort of top technique to making sure that personas are used and don't just get left somewhere to die?
Yeah, that was a big part of this exercise, which is how do we get them used consistently and sustainably across the organization to create this culture of user centricity or employee centricity. And so here we constantly improve and iterate on the data that informs these personas. And at the top global level, we do give guidance in what we uncover through our employee listening programs or the engagement surveys, and we articulate what their needs and goals and challenges and pain points are up at the top level. But then along with each persona, we created empty blank templates so that when teams go to apply these personas in a really specific activity or exercise or program, like, signing up for their benefits. They can take these blank templates informed by those broad dimensions I talked about and talk about what are the needs, pain points, and influences regarding this very specific activity or program. And they can do the user research with those employees to fill those in. So having this repeatable template-based approach where teams can customize them and use them, but still when they go to present them and talk to them with other teams or our leaders, they're talking about the same personas. So you start to get some consistency and some recognition of, oh, that's Emma, that's our experienced employee, right?
I love it. Thank you. It reminds me of when I was a kid, you could get these colouring in books and you could dress the dolls up and you could cut out the different clothes with little tabs that you could hook them on and then you could take them off again. So that's how I like to think of it. So thank you. Justin, I'm going to come back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Damon. And, we knew this was going to be one of the challenges of getting our contributors to only give a little amuse-bouche, a little teaser trailer. We could, of course, keep talking about this topic in itself for the rest of the call. And indeed, you'll see in the chat when you have a moment to relax there after your bit, there's lots of questions coming in the chat. And while you've been talking, I've been scrolling across the screens, watching many. I can see them nodding heads and people making notes. And even, I have to say, even Charlotte O'Reilly's baby, who made an appearance there, was nodding their head as well. So you're speaking to the people, Damon. So thanks so much for that. And for those of you who've asked questions, we will loop back and pick up on some of those questions at the end of the call. Nabel, we are coming your way. Now tell us, from San Diego to where do we find you?
Sussex, not quite San Diego.
San Diego to Sussex. You never know, for our American friends, they might be like, oh, Sussex, wow.
Sussex,
it's
beautiful.
If you don't know Sussex, guys, it's amazing. Okay?
It's the place to be. It really
definitely is. Yeah, we've got a few Sussex residents here, myself included. Nabel, so tell us a little bit about why Emma and Belinda were interested in talking to you about the topic.
Wow. Well, it feels like we first started talking quite some time ago. So this is a really exciting moment to be here. And it would be lovely if we were in a room with lots of drink to go with it, but I'm sure we can do that another time to make up for it. But so I guess part of the reason we started talking was that there's a piece around employee experience that, from my perspective, links into kind of design thinking and human-centered thinking and agile ways of working. And that was like our starting point, really. And we had lots of conversations and delved into it more deeply. And the piece that is shared in the book is kind of linked with giving some examples around the wide and broad topic of onboarding. And there's some kind of real life references to the current organisation I work in, which is Roche, which is a global healthcare organisation, but also the previous organisation I worked in, which was River Island, so a kind of fast fashion retailer. So two different contexts in terms of business, but being able to apply similar principles. And essentially, I think you can apply similar principles to the way in which you think about employee experience, regardless of the size of the business. I think you can think about the way in which you interact with your people broadly the same way.
Fantastic. So that's an interesting takeout, that the principles can apply in different contexts, scaling up and scaling down. Thanks for that, Nabel. That gives us a sense of your particular focus. I know the subject is close to your heart and there's lots of links. Emma or Belinda, is anything you want to pick up on with Nabel, particularly about your interaction on the book?
Yeah, it'd be great. This is such an unkind question because I think we've got about 3 minutes. But sort of top tips for designing onboarding. How do you approach that, or how have you approached that, and why is it different, and what sort of results have you got?
Yeah, 3 minutes and go. Well, so
yeah,
when you asked me to do this and said, well, spend about 5 minutes onboarding, I was thinking, wow, okay, right.
Yeah, thanks.
some thoughts that I kind of some top tips to consider. I think there's so much out there on onboarding and so much research and insight that we can all look at, and we would have had our own experiences both as employees but also in terms of most likely the nature of our roles and how we want to make a really great experience for people. But I think there's a couple of things that really stand out for me when you're considering an onboarding experience in your organisation, and I think the first one is about individuality and moments that matter, and you start to see, I think, quite often now examples of creative things that organisations are doing that are kind of surprise moments for people when they join an organisation, and I think that's great. But if you want to take that to another level, really think about that on an individual basis and really connect in to the people that are joining your business, and really think about, you know, what's going to make a difference for them and what do their moments that matter really look like. And I could speak about that one for ages, but that's the first one to consider. I think the second one is, and again it goes back to agility, but it's about how we approach sharing of information. I'm pretty confident that pretty much all of us will have experienced an onboarding or an induction program that is information overload, and it's ineffective. You know, we seem to think that we need to deliver everything to people in their first few weeks, essentially to tick a list to say, we covered that, we told you. And actually, if we reframe that and think to ourselves, what's the point of need at which time someone needs to know some information, that creates a much better experience for the individual. And the example I often lean on, and it's a simple one, but it's like, in my first 2 weeks in my new role, I don't need to know what the expenses process is. I need to know what the expenses process is when I first submit an expense claim, and I need someone to sit with me and show me how to do it at that point. I don't need to do it in the first few weeks. So it's about information at the point of need, I think is probably the second one. And I think the third one, and I'll only share three because of the time that we've got, but the third one is about, for me, it's all about the feels, right? So it's more about how people feel rather than what they know. And I think we focus too much effort on, we've got to get this information out to people in their first month, in their first 6 weeks, and they need to know this stuff. Well, actually, it's much more about how someone feels in their first few weeks and how you've made them feel and how they feel they've connected into the business. It's way more important in terms of being able to set the tone for how that person's career is likely to pan out within the business, and also how likely they feel that they've made the right decision to join an organisation. And I guess when you think about feelings, it's what are we doing in our onboarding experiences to make someone feel excited, curious to learn, motivated, welcomed, and that they belong, and not feel drained by information, disorientated, alone and uncertain. So for me, they're probably the three big buckets that I would say consider first off when you're really thinking about what an onboarding experience looks like in your business.
Thank you so much.
Is that quick enough?
Yeah, I can't believe how much you can cover in such a short space of time. Thank you so much. And I know there is so much. And I think actually we have to get you all back and do a full-on research show and deep dive into each of these topics. So we'll set that up. But I think, Emma, I'd like to suggest that the second edition of the book is called It's All About the Feels. I think that's a much stronger title. So thanks for that one.
Yeah,
you can have it.
Just to slightly build on that, it's a great example that you give there, Nabel, about the way that the organisation makes you feel, and the fact that when we first look at EX, we kind of go to the obvious stuff, the kind of the life cycle touch points. And when you apply the sort of the design thinking approach that we set out in the book and positive psychology, what we tend to find is that, you know, the sort of the everyday moments, the moments that matter, that sometimes we don't have as much control over, the things that make the biggest difference. And I always quote my first day at an insurance company I worked for many years ago, when everyone went off for lunch and no one invited me and no one showed me where to go, and that stick with me forever, you know. So we kind of talk about those everyday moments as well, and I think we tend to forget about those. So it's like how we mine those and unearth those and figure out where we need to kind of focus our attention. So thank you for raising that.
Yes, thank you, Nabel, and so lovely to hear you talking about feelings. Fantastic. Well, one of the themes running through the research shows is how sometimes talking about feelings and emotions is can feel a little bit, it's a bit taboo. it's a bit of a dirty word. And we had Helena Clayton on, who of course talks about love and leadership. And so we got right down and dirty with Helena on the Reset Show, and we talked about all of those forbidden topics, like how do we actually feel and what part can love play in this, and really lovely, inspiring. And you know, 3, perfect, rule of 3. We wouldn't have remembered more than 3, and you finished on the strongest. So beautifully done. Thank you, Nabel. And some questions coming in as well there on the chat. And Damon, really appreciate, so I know you've been able to answer some of the questions already offline in the chat, which is great. That saves a little bit of our remaining bandwidth at the end of the show. So thank you so much for that. We are moving, I don't know in what direction we're moving, because I don't know where Lindsay is in the world. Lindsay, does it begin with S? Because so far we've had San Diego and Sussex. Where are you calling us from?
I'm calling from Seattle.
Get in! Okay, so we've gone back across the pond to Seattle. Oh, how wonderful. Thank you so much again. What time of day is it in Seattle? I'm not going to make an assumption and get it wrong.
9:30 morning.
Good morning, Seattle. Wonderful. So listen, Lindsay, you get how we're rolling here. We're giving a little bit of background to who you are, and then diving into the particular area of interest that Emma and Belinda were unpicking with you. Tell us a little bit about you and what brought you together with Emma and Belinda.
Yeah, so I contributed to the section of the book around prototyping and testing. So I'll give a real practical example. I was working at Expedia Group at the time, that's the example I used. And we were well into a journey using design thinking principles to kind of deconstruct and redesign parts of our employee experience. At the time, I was in charge of our employee engagement survey, which was pretty traditional, pretty long, well responded to, lots of action. Kind of considered a bit of a sacred thing for people. So we're talking about the measurement of the whole experience, and how do we kind of deconstruct the measuring of it using the principles of prototyping. So go ahead.
Fantastic, thank you. That's a really lovely introduction and very clear. And we've had some great conversations about prototyping on the Reset Show. I sort of, in lots of these topics, I come to this with I like to say I come to this with a Zen mind, a beginner's mind. It's my excuse for not knowing a huge amount about the topic. But prototyping really fits nicely with the theme of the book, doesn't it? Because it's so practical. It really is about, well, here's the theory, let's just try it out. Emma and Belinda, what do I not know about Lindsay and her contribution to the book that you do know?
One thing I know about Lindsay is that you don't know is that we share a love of boats. So when we talk, we often talk boats, but we're not going to do that right now. But I think whenever I think of your contribution in the book, it's a really visual, the sort of the image of what you created, your prototype of what you created, I think isn't what most people would think about as being a prototype. I don't know why I said this earlier today. When I think of prototypes, I tend to think of cars. I've really no idea why, which is very expensive, very engineered, but yours was much more about bits of paper and sellotape and so on. But tell us a little bit about how you use that in relation to your employee listening.
Yeah. So over the years that I had managed this, we called it a product. Everything that we thought of in HR was a product. So we took a very kind of tech mindset to our work. And in this product, there were a lot of opinions. Everyone wanted their question kind of in this survey because it had such, such usefulness in terms of what leaders and managers and everyone could use. So to Damon's point on personas, we had a lot of different audiences, users, personas that wanted different things. And in a way, we could have made a list of criteria and a lovely table of whose needs get met and make choices. But instead, we said, let's come up with a couple basically options and turn those into prototypes. So combining different things around the timing was, did we want to listen to people daily or weekly or quarterly? Did we want repetitive kind of questions over time? Did we want different things at different times? So just a lot of different options. We did a mix and match. And instead of programming the actual surveys and sending them out and saying, what do you like about it? We made them on posters. Very low tech, very cheap. Highly unusual for a tech company to say we're not going to at least try to make some tech to show the tech, but on purpose to say that it's not about, we don't want to distract with the technology and the look and the feel and the buttons. That wasn't the point. The point was, how is this going to be as an experience for you as an employee in terms of taking a survey, as a manager or a leader in terms of when you get results and what those look like and what do we want you to do with them. So we made these posters. At the time we were in person, so we put them around the room. We invited different persona groups into the room, explained kind of what we were doing, and asked them to use sticky notes and colored dots and walk around and kind of just give us feedback. So we listened to them as kind of an anthropologist would, and just our job was just shut up and listen and watch them put dots on, you know, kind of, we had plus, minus, question mark, and exclamation point. What do you like? What do you not like? What do you have questions about this experience? And what just you love the whole thing, everything about it. It's surprise and delights you. So we were able to do that and get their feedback. And in the moment, most of them redesigned a new prototype and a new option to add to the list. But that was able also to have them listen to each other and develop, we talk about this a lot in design thinking, empathy of each other's needs as different stakeholders, and really learning and hearing from each other as an employee. Oh, I didn't think about that. If you're giving feedback every day, you want to see change every day, or some things take a long time. So don't ask me about something that takes a long time to change, because I'm going to expect that really quickly. So we were able to have them listen to each other. We could listen, we could count the dots, and at the end kind of come up with new combinations. New prototypes to test. So this prototype, test, iterate, you can keep doing it for a very long time. We had some practical, you know, stopping points we had to meet to make some choices, and then take those options to our different survey vendors and say, let's try these out, and try them out in different ways. So we had a concept of what we called the champagne test. So drink your own champagne. If you're going to test something out, first test it on yourself. And it sounds better than some of the other test sort of phrases people use. So let's do a champagne test on HR. If we like our product, then we can launch it to employees. So we made a couple, you know, changes. We did some things with our vendors, and we said, we're going to try this out with HR first. We were also able to do kind of a longer design process, and we did this with other prototypes as well, is invite some of those really passionate people and some of the naysayers in those prototype sessions into more of a design group to really continue with us on the iterating and the testing as we move forward, and made some, you know, some financial commitments and some bigger, longer term choices. We could invite them to kind of be on our team, as it were, in a virtual team, and move our choices forward with longer impact from employees.
I just love it.
Fantastic. That's I love that, the champagne test. Thank you, Lindsay. I'm definitely going to be nicking that one. We nicked from Carly Love, who was on the research show. We nicked Wizard of Oz prototyping, which has become just that lovely sense of just, you know, literally get a bunch of things and make something and just try it out. And it doesn't have to be high tech. And in fact, the fact that it's not high tech adds to its appeal. Because back to Nabelle's point about how do you feel, you know, you talked about, well, how do you want people to feel when they're engaging in those processes? And what a different experience to come into the room and to have that sense of inner creativity reawoken. It's so refreshing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We were able to also, I will say, we were able to do this virtually. So we had quite a global workforce. Yeah. We did a lot in the room. We also did slides, you know, and kind of put things up and had people make their votes. Annotations
and
yeah. But there was something tactical about, I'm going to hand a bunch of vice presidents sticky dots and say, you know, vote, go tell me what you like.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you've mentioned it now. We don't have time to dive in, but broadly speaking, we've all discovered, I think, no matter how tech savvy and tech driven we are, we've all discovered the power of analog in many different areas of our life. You know, and by analog, I mean the ability to simply sit in a room with someone and have a conversation. We've rediscovered how important and powerful that can be. Lindsay, thank you so much. I'm going to gallop on apace towards Sarah. Sarah, speaking of things digital, first of all, the question on everybody's lips is, where are you calling us from today?
Sussex.
Sussex again.
Yeah, you've got a
4 out of 4. Fantastic. We couldn't have even planned that. And not only that, your name begins with S. So that's why we finish. We go out with a bang. Thank you so much, Sarah. There's so much I could say about you and your involvement with Emma and Belinda. Give us a little bit of context of why you were part of this project.
Yeah, okay, so my role is in the sort of digital experience, customer experience, and I work for the CIPD, which most people on the call probably know, but it's the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development. And my interest really is in the design thinking side of things, the user experience, customer experience side of things. But obviously working for CIPD, I'm also interested in the HR space and employee experience. And I think we were having a drink and the conversation moved to possible books. And yeah, I think that's how it all happened.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Emma and Belinda, over to you to dig a little deeper with Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. So for all the S's, I was introduced to Sarah through another Sarah. That's how we ended up having a drink in Sussex. So all the S's. So yeah, I mean, Sarah, you know, your understanding and depth of knowledge around design thinking is just really extraordinary. So I think the conversation we had and what we've explored over the months is really using design thinking to create a culture of, well, many good things. We love design thinking, right? And the spin-off benefits of design thinking just keep on giving. So collaboration, innovation, as well as the customer centricity bit. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you describe in the book and bring that to life for us.
Yeah, well, I think we introduced design thinking sort of almost like, I think there's this phrase Harold Jarsch uses, which is a Trojan mouse activity. And it was really one of a number of customer experience activities. And it was an attempt really to move CIPD along on that kind of, you know, culture change trajectory. And yeah, it's really interesting. When we first started talking about innovation, there was a real misunderstanding about what innovation was. You know, innovation was something that Google do, that IBM do. It's really interesting hearing David talk earlier. It wasn't something that kind of a 100-year-old membership body did. And it was also maybe something that kind of architects did, or, you know, design agencies did. And so it's really been a lot of work, as I say, under the radar to try and break down some of those myths that innovation is something that should be part of every 21st century knowledge workers skills tool bag, if you like. It should be something that we can all draw on. We can all draw on the, not just the framework, but also the tools that sit within it to help us to solve any challenge. And of course, EX is one of those challenges. So yeah, and when I was sort of thinking about, you know, this your book and this evening, I remembered a quote actually that was from yours and Emma's course, which is a terrific course, the EX course that I went on last year. And you had this quote, and I don't know where it came from, so I'll have to ask you if you can remember. But it was that employees have become the consumers of the workplace. And it was like, oh yes, my two interest areas have suddenly smushed together, you know, design, experience, but also, you know, the workplace and working lives, you know. So yeah, it's I can't even remember what the question is. I've been burbling, but it's a passion, and it's been a real pleasure to share that passion and help you with your book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's from Gallup. Emma, nod if I'm right. It's a Gallup quote. It's just great. I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. But it just sums it up, as you say, and it's it's that where all of your passions sort of collide. And my background was actually marketing and journalism and all sorts of things. So yeah, these things all sort of overlap, which is really interesting. And I think what I really liked about the example that you shared in the book, and again, I'm a really visual person, so it's a lot like Lindsay's, is you created a research safari. So you did some research into your audience, and then you sort of shared that research back with the people that you were co-creating with in this sort of a safari, something that people walked through. Can you tell us briefly about that?
Yeah, we've used the technique a few times really. It's a way of being able to synthesize and communicate a huge amount of user research, because you don't, and essentially don't want to spend the whole sprint just doing that, because that's quite a big activity in and of itself. So we sort of pre-digest, if you like, the user research, and we bring it to life in vignettes. They're not quite personas exactly, but they sort of tell the story of the different people that we've talked to, and what their needs are, what their frustrations are, their pain points, their moments of truth, all of those sorts of things. And yeah, we well, either virtually, so obviously we've been doing that the last year, but we physically put them around the room, these little vignettes, and then we give everybody, the participants on the design thinking course, a sort of a few reflective practice questions to ask themselves of the personas, you know, and I'm sorry, of the vignettes of the user research, and then we then go into a persona exercise, and then a customer journey exercise, which sort of again synthesizes that research down even further and turns it into something insightful that you can then use as a jumping off point for the sort of the ideation stage, if you like, of the design thinking process.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And you've just so beautifully expressed the whole kind of flow as well, the sort of like, you know, the process. I know it's not linear, but the way that you might tackle an EX design challenge. And I'm really surprised that Justin and Emma haven't grabbed and gone all over your Trojan mice. I thought they'd be loving that and waving that around above their heads.
No, I just, before we go to sort of questions, I wasn't going to talk about that. What I love about your story, Sarah, is, you know, talking about using these tools at the CIPD, because I think it's great having Damon on the call, because I think, you know, if anyone says who's doing this really well, I would say IBM. They're my go-to, right? They are pioneers. They're doing amazing work, and that's probably to be expected, right? Because they're you know, the market they operate in. But a real motivation for me and for B, I think, in writing the book, was to kind of make this world accessible to all organizations. You don't have to be your Googles or your IBMs or your Facebooks to do this stuff. Anyone can do it. So we tried to kind of really, you know, demystify it basically. So that was a real motivation for us, and for me particularly, in sort of, you know, getting case studies and examples from organizations that you might not traditionally expect to be using these kinds of tools. I think makes people think, oh, well, if they're doing it, maybe we could do it. So thank you for sharing that.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah, that was something I just wanted to pick up on, actually. Thank you, Sarah. Emma, just what you were talking about in terms of the context in which we see these principles being applied, because I'm looking through the people on the call, some of whom I know personally, and I know some of us on the call are involved in micro organizations, much smaller, like startups or small to medium enterprises. How relevant do you think we would find the book in terms of being able to apply this stuff on a much smaller scale?
Yeah, so I'll let B interject here, but I obviously, I'm going to say completely relevant, right?
Of course.
Really passionate about the fact that you use these tools in a way that works for you. We offer them up as we're not prescriptive in our approach. We don't do the, you know, lots of respect for people like Jacob Morgan who say, here's a model, do it this way. We don't do that. We say, here's some stuff that we know works because either we've tested it or our contributors have tested it. Figure out how to use it for you. So some people really thrive in that environment. They love that bit of ambiguity. Other people find it a little bit scary, like, no, just tell me what to do. But I personally feel like you've got to make it relevant and right for your organization. And so I think that the tools are absolutely you know, useful and applicable for any organization, you know, starting with, you know, the human-centered approach to put your people at the heart of what you're trying to do. You know, something as simple as, we've got a great model in the book called the employee life spiral. So rather than a life cycle, it's a life spiral because it hasn't got a definitive beginning and end. And just switching the focus from us attracting, onboarding, inducting, performance managing to what is the experience for our people. So oh, I'd quite like to come and work for this organisation. How's my first day? Just something as simple as that just gets you into that mindset. And I think that's relevant no matter what size of organisation you are. So that would be my answer to that. B, I'm sure you've got some views on that.
Funny enough, I agree with everything you just said, which is just as well. But I quite often find myself talking about actually two of Emma's clients that you've worked with. So, this idea of democratizing, a great experience shouldn't just be for people who have nice home offices or who work in gorgeous London, swanky offices. Actually, why shouldn't you have a great experience at work if you're working in a porter cabin or on an oil rig? Quoting two of Emma's clients. And actually that's why we just can't be prescriptive. We've got to make this stuff as accessible as possible, because it shouldn't be elitist.
Lovely, thank you. We have had a few questions come in, most of which have been already responded to, so thank you to our contributors for responding. And we had a lovely quote. So speaking of quotes, Sarah mentioned a quote there, and I think it was Julie who talked about the quote earlier. I'm just scrolling up. Yes, from the Maya Angelou quote, which even if you're familiar with it, it's always wonderful to be reminded of it. And it was sparked by you, Nabel, by your comments about feeling. And it's, people may not remember what you said or did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that feels to me like a good point to round our conversation to a close. We're at that fatal Columbo moment where it's 2 minutes to 6 and someone will just go, one more thing, and then the whole thing just explodes. So I'm going to suggest that unless anyone really does have a burning question or anything to say to our lovely contributors and authors, I'm going to hand over to Emma and Belinda to wrap up and say thank you. And Katie, I will probably just remind me, we have a reset show coming up that I should plug, shouldn't I?
We do. We have one next Wednesday at 1 p.m. GMT. And that will be lessons from UX and CX with Kerry Davies and Paul Bailey from Spark.
Fantastic. Thank you. So if you haven't joined them or watched them, please do. But other than that, Emma and Belinda, it's your party, so you should have the final word, I think.
Cool, thanks, Justin. So again, just want to say a massive thank you. I've been blown away by people's generosity in giving us time and supporting this and just coming along this evening, and really looking forward to when we are able to get back in a physical place together as much as possible to celebrate properly. So massive thank you. And any questions, feel free to drop us a line, and we're really happy to kind of follow up. And just really hope you enjoy the book, and really, interested to see what you think of it, and keep the conversation going, because I think this is the start of this exploration into this new world. So just keep the conversation going and let us know how you get on. So massive thank you from me for coming along this evening.
Yeah, and the same from me. I'm going to be really cheeky, actually. So Bruce Daisley, who is one of our heroes, has written us a lovely endorsement. He also gave us some tips on how to get this book into as many people's hands as possible. His number one tip was saying, when people say to you they love the book, say, thank you so much. Please would you write us a review on Amazon? So that would be my parting shot, which feels really cheeky, but Bruce told me to do it, and he's a bit of our hero. So thank you so much for coming. I do think there's so much more depth we can go into with you guys, the contributors, and also other people who've contributed to the book. So follow the Reset show, because I think we'll do more deep dives in that. So that's podcast, YouTube, as well as the live show as well. And thank you everybody for coming and supporting us.
And thank you, Justin, for hosting today as well. You're a star. Cheers for that.
Pleasure, always a pleasure. Thanks everyone. Have a lovely evening or morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.